Welcome back to Galaxy Recaps. Today we'll be diving into a sci-fi thriller film titled The Happening. Enjoy the recap. One morning in New York City's Central Park, two friends are enjoying a peaceful reading session when one of them starts noticing something bizarre. The people around them begin acting strangely, and to her horror, the girl sitting beside her suddenly starts injuring herself. Just a few blocks away, chaos unfolds at a construction site. Workers are collapsing to their deaths, leaving their manager in complete shock and disbelief. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, science teacher Elliot Moore is in the middle of his class when the school's vice principal summons all the teachers for an urgent meeting. They're informed about a mysterious attack in Central Park, involving an airborne toxin that affects the human mind. The staff is warned to watch for symptoms like disorientation and confused speech. As the school is dismissed, Elliot's colleague Julian approaches him with a plan. He urges Elliot and his wife Alma to leave the city and take refuge at his mother's house. Elliot hesitates but eventually agrees, though he warns Julian that Alma's behavior may seem odd. In response, Julian confesses something personal. On Elliot and Alma's wedding day, he had seen her crying, hinting that she may not have been ready for marriage. Returning home, Elliot finds Alma glued to the news, watching grim reports on how the toxin disrupts the human self-preservation instinct, leading to hallucinations and self-harm. As Elliot packs for their journey, Alma receives a call from someone named Joey but chooses to ignore it. Soon after, they arrive at the train station and reunite with Julian and his young daughter Jess. While waiting, they overhear devastating reports about the spreading airborne virus. Julian explains that his wife was stuck in traffic and would take the next train. When he expresses relief that Alma is coming along, she immediately realizes that Elliot must have told him about their marital issues. Irritated, she decides to sit alone on the train. As the train departs, the situation worsens. What was once contained in New York has now reached Philadelphia, leaving mass casualties in its wake. On board, Alma receives another call from the mysterious Joey, and this time she answers briefly, telling him to stop contacting her. The passengers soon learn that Boston has also been affected. Suddenly, the train halts in a small Pennsylvania town called Filbert. Confused, Elliot approaches the train crew, who deliver unsettling news. The train will not be going any further. Stranded, the passengers make their way to a local restaurant, anxiously waiting for more information on what to do next. Elliot keeps Jess company while Julian steps away to grab some food. As they chat and share a brief moment of laughter, another passenger shares a disturbing video from the Philadelphia Zoo. The footage shows a zookeeper standing motionless as lions attack him, willingly allowing himself to be mauled. A short while later, a man sets up a TV, where a news reporter details the rapidly escalating disaster. The grim realization sinks in. Filbert is now at the center of the unfolding catastrophe. Suddenly, the restaurant's power cuts out and panic spreads. A man warns that staying put means certain death. Without hesitation, the crowd rushes to evacuate, desperate to escape the invisible threat. Chaos erupts as people hijack cars and flee in different directions. Elliot tries to flag down a driver, but the man ignores him and speeds away. Fortunately, another car pulls up and the driver offers them a ride. At that moment, Julian rushes over in distress. He still can't reach his wife. He has found a vehicle heading toward her location and makes a heartbreaking decision. With no time to waste, he entrusts Jess to Elliot and Alma, handing her a family photo before giving her one final hug. Then he dashes to the other car, leaving his daughter behind as he speeds off in search of his wife. Meanwhile, Elliot, Alma, and Jess arrive at a plant nursery, where the owner hurriedly gathers supplies before they depart. As they wait, he shares a theory: trees and plants are capable of releasing chemical compounds, and he believes they may be responsible for the attacks. Elsewhere, Julian and his group arrive in Princeton, but something is eerily off. The streets are silent and the town feels abandoned. As the toxin takes over the area, panic sets in. The group frantically seals the car's air vents, trying to keep the deadly toxin out. In an attempt to calm the passengers, Julian poses a math riddle. If you start with a penny and double it every day, how much would you have in a month? But before anyone can answer, he notices a small leak in the roof. Just as he reveals the solution to his riddle, their driver loses control. The car speeds up and crashes into a tree. Julian survives the impact, but it's too late. The toxin has already taken hold, sealing his tragic fate. Back on the road, Elliot and the others continue their escape when they spot something ominous in the distance. He quickly grabs binoculars and is horrified to see lifeless bodies scattered ahead. Realizing they are heading straight into danger, he asks Alma for the map. Without hesitation, they turn around, taking a different route to avoid exposure. After some time, they are stopped by Private Oster, a military agent stationed at a checkpoint. He delivers grim news. His base has already been infected, meaning there's nowhere safe to go. As more vehicles arrive from alternate routes, the nursery owner's wife approaches them, seeking information. Elliot, still trying to reach Julian, notices a missed call from Joey on Alma's phone. Instead of addressing it, his mind races with the unsettling question, could the trees really be behind this? With all surrounding areas compromised, the group has no choice but to stay put. As they wait, more and more survivors arrive, fleeing from the chaos, desperately searching for safety in a world that seems to be crumbling around them. Among the survivors, a woman is on a call with her daughter, who is still in Princeton. As they speak, the town's dire situation becomes evident. Princeton has been hit hard by the toxin. Suddenly, her daughter's speech turns nonsensical, a chilling sign of confusion. Everyone watches in horror as the inevitable unfolds. The call abruptly ends, confirming another tragic loss. Already burdened with worry over Julian, Elliot is devastated by this news. He silently grieves, realizing he has lost his friend. Jess, sensing his sorrow, approaches and gently kisses him on the cheek. Together, they mourn the loss of not just a friend, but a father. Later, while speaking with Alma, the nursery owner reiterates his theory. Plants have the ability to release chemicals in response to threats. He explains how trees, bushes, and other plant life communicate with one another, suggesting that nature itself may be retaliating. As Elliot discusses their next move with Private Oster, the soldier gathers the survivors and announces that they need to find a safer location to wait out the crisis. The larger group splits into two smaller groups, each heading on foot toward a nearby county. Elliot, Alma, and Jess stay in one group, while Private Oster and the nursery owner lead the other. As they move forward, a troubling sight catches their attention. A strong wind is heading their way. The nursery owner looks ahead and sees Private Oster and others suddenly acting strangely. Before anyone can react, gunshots ring out. Elliot and his group freeze as they hear the unmistakable sound of multiple rounds being fired. Elliot's mind races. He begins to notice a pattern. The other group was larger than theirs, which might have triggered the plants to release the toxin. If his theory is correct, the plants are reacting to human presence, and the attacks are happening when too many people gather in one place. The section of the field they are in hasn't been affected yet, meaning they might be safe for now. Determined to stay ahead of the wind, Elliot urges the group to keep moving, but before they can react, the wind finally reaches them. They brace themselves for the worst, expecting the toxin to take effect. But miraculously, nothing happens. Confused yet relieved, they press on. As they continue, two men, Gary and Josh, introduce themselves and join the group. While searching through an abandoned vehicle for supplies, Elliot finds a working radio. A broadcast plays, suggesting that the attacks might be linked to a nuclear leak due to the limited scope of the incidents. Spotting a house in the distance, the group decides to check it out. Inside, Elliot finds a map marking a town called Arundel about 10 miles away. Discussing their next move with Alma, they agree that their best bet for survival is to head somewhere with the least human population, regardless of whether the threat is natural or man-made. Taking inspiration from the nursery owner, Elliot approaches a plant inside the house and calmly speaks to it, assuring it that they mean no harm. But as he does, he realizes something strange. The plant is fake. Looking around, they discover more bizarre details. Most of the objects in the house, including the food and drinks, are artificial. Disturbed by the eerie setting, they decide to leave. Outside, they spot more survivors searching for shelter. However, before they can warn them, they witness firsthand the horrifying consequences of being in a large group. The toxin is triggered, and in an instant, every single one of them succumbs to its deadly effect. As they continue their journey, the two kids accompanying Elliot suddenly start asking about his relationship. Uninterested in discussing it, he quickly shuts them down. Out of nowhere, they stumble upon a barn and discover a working radio broadcasting an emergency message. The broadcast urges survivors to head west for safety. Later, Alma tells Elliot that Jess is hungry, and he agrees that they need to find food. Spotting a house with boarded-up windows, they decide to investigate. While Jess plays on a swing outside, the other kids suggest breaking in. But before they take any action, they spot movement inside. Hoping for help, they knock and ask for food, but the frightened residents refuse, fearing contamination. Elliot tries to reason with them, insisting that the air is safe. However, Josh and Jared grow impatient and attempt to force their way in. That's when the situation turns deadly. A man from inside the barricaded house pulls out a gun and without hesitation shoots Josh. Before anyone can react, he turns his weapon on Jared, killing him as well. Alma, horrified, tells Elliot they need to flee immediately. Without looking back, they grab Jess and take off into the night. Meanwhile, news reports from Petersburg, West Virginia, urge people to stay indoors. While in Florida, a professor warns that the event will reach its most critical point by tomorrow. In Nebraska, heavily armed men listen to the same broadcast, discussing theories of CIA involvement. Barricades have been set up from Maryland all the way to Massachusetts, as panic spreads across the country. Wandering through the countryside, Elliot, Alma, and Jess eventually stumble upon an isolated old house with no signs of power. As Elliot cautiously explores the property, he encounters an elderly woman who introduces herself as Mrs. Jones. She seems eccentric, but to their relief, she invites them inside for supper. Despite her odd behavior, the group is grateful for food and shelter. As they settle in, they learn that Mrs. Jones lives completely off the grid, with no contact with the outside world. When they attempt to explain the bizarre outbreak, she firmly shuts them down, insisting that she doesn't want to know anything about it. Though uneasy about her peculiar attitude, they are thankful when she allows them to stay the night. Later, after Jess falls asleep, Elliot and Alma whisper about Mrs. Jones's strange demeanor, realizing that for now, they'll just have to tolerate it, at least until morning. Just then, the sound of creaking floorboards sends a chill through the air. Mrs. Jones has arrived. She glares at Elliot and Alma, accusing them of having ulterior motives. Elliot quickly reassures her that they mean no harm, but she turns away, visibly distrustful. The next morning, Elliot wakes up alone and heads downstairs. As he cautiously explores the house, he stumbles upon a doll in Mrs. Jones's bedroom. Before he can process what he's seeing, Mrs. Jones storms in, furious at his intrusion. She demands that he leave immediately before stepping outside herself. Sensing something is wrong, Elliot follows her out, attempting to explain. But then, the horrifying realization dawns: she has been infected by the toxin. Panic surges through him as he races back inside, slamming the door shut and calling out for Alma. Outside, Mrs. Jones succumbs to the infection, repeatedly smashing her head against the windows, each impact echoing through the house. Elliot, desperate to find Alma and Jess, carefully moves through the house. Finally, he spots them. They are across the backyard inside the spring house. He remembers what Mrs. Jones had mentioned the night before: an underground talking tube connects the two buildings. Thinking fast, Elliot shouts through the tube, urging Alma to lock the doors and windows. Realizing that Mrs. Jones was completely alone when she got infected, Elliot feels a deep sense of helplessness. He apologizes to Alma, believing he has failed them both. But in the face of looming death, all their past arguments vanish. Through the talking tube, they reminisce about the first time they met, clinging to the love they share. Accepting that their lives might end, they make a final decision. They refuse to die apart. Without hesitation, Elliot steps outside. At the same time, Alma and Jess leave the spring house. Bracing for the worst, they walk toward each other. The wind swirls around them, but nothing happens. They stand there unharmed, puzzled at their survival. Even so, they retreat inside and wait a little longer. Eventually, Elliot reaches a conclusion. The toxin's effects may have ended just before they stepped outside. 3 months later, life has returned to a fragile normal. Alma gets Jess ready for her first day of school while Elliot waits with her for the bus. On the television, a toxicology expert compares the event to a red tide, suggesting that this may have been nature's way of defending itself against humanity. He warns that this could have been just a prelude, a small-scale warning of something far worse to come. Outside, Alma stands waiting, holding on to a special surprise for Elliot. As he walks toward her, she finally shares the news: she's pregnant. While all seems peaceful across the world in a park in Paris, something sinister begins to unfold. 2 men stroll through the park, enjoying their day, when suddenly everything changes. One man notices that the people around them have stopped moving entirely. His friend, standing beside him, starts mumbling the same phrase over and over again. The nightmare is far from over. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.